Good morning, Morai Rabotai. We're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Siman Petet, and we're finishing Seif Gimal. We started speaking about whether or not you could have coffee and tea before Shacharit. Right nowadays, of course, we are very sensitive, very weak, and we would like to think that you could even have like a 5-course Seudah before you get out of the bed and change from your jammies to your regular clothing. That's how bad it has become. But nevertheless, this happens to be actually a very much, very well discussed literature is there on this topic. The Shulchan Aruch, of course, said you could only have water. And the Kaf HaChaim said even water better not to have, right? The Chatchila. But Shulchan Aruch says water. So now, is water only, or can you have at least the tea or coffee? So the Chafetz Chaim Berura discusses this halacha. Mai mutar in Katan Chafbet writes the Mishna Berura. There's no gava in water. You're just drinking water to hydrate yourself. If you're thirsty, it's not a problem. But davka belo sukar. But says the Mishna Berura, that's only without sugar. You cannot sweeten it. Aval im sukar asur. With sugar, it's asur. Even water. And of course, you cannot have shchar, you cannot have beer. That's vaday asur. That's for sure asur before tefillah. Now, how about tea and coffee? V'tei v'kafeh, which means tea and coffee. Mutar lishtoto kodem tefillah k'dei shuchal lechaven dato l'tefillah. That you could drink before tefillah because it wakes you up. Injects some nicotine and caffeine inside your system. It wakes you up. It makes your veins open a little bit more and your brain functional more. And that's good. That you could do because it's for sorech tefillah.
How about smoking?
Now, when it doesn't say, that's always asur. Ubifrat behamekomot sheregilin bahem ve'en mityashev hadat biltam, and especially in places sheregilin bahem. Especially if you're used to having tea and coffee, and without it you cannot have Yeshuv Hadat. Without it you can't have a proper mindset. You don't wake up until you have your coffee. You have headaches if you go on without your coffee. So that, of course, says the Mishnah Berura, you could be more mekel. And that's only without sugar and without milk. But it says the minhag is, says the Chafetz Chaim, that people do use sugar. It could be that when Achronim say that with sugar is asur, rak im noten asukar betoch hateh lemateko. Dezehu asur kodem hatefila. If you sweeten it, then that would be a problem. If you have what are these, like sugar cubes, you take a little bit of sugar in your mouth when you drink the bitter coffee or tea, and without it you can't really drink it. That's not bichlal gava. That's just you want to push it down your throat. You want to have it with a minimum pleasant feeling that you could at least do it. That would be fine. Then he concludes, sweetening the tea or having a little bit something, food, before before tefillah when you are drinking the tea or coffee, in order not to have it on an empty stomach. There's no way to be mekel on that before tefillah, right? So those people who have a piece of kugel and some cholent before tefillah, that's where this comes in to tell you that that's not halachically viable. It's not something that you could do. Unless somebody is really weak, and for medical purposes he needs this. But even with that, you should at least say Shema before, say your brachot, because of Shachar, because of Torah, the parasha Vakedah maybe, and Shema Yisrael, and then you could do it. כתב בספר פתחי תשובה החדש, יש למנוע מלשתות התה בבוקר קודם תפילה באספת חברים. He writes the פתחי תשובה in Orach Chaim. He says, even tea, you should not have like a group gathering to drink tea or coffee. That you cannot have. In other words, you have to shtiblachs. You go. This happens like in larger cities. In shtiblachs, you have a coffee room and people are there schmoozing there, having their coffee before tefillah, schmoozing. That you cannot have. Says B'tchel Shua. That's already like you're koveh yourself. You're setting yourself up for drinking and schmoozing before tefillah. That's not proper. Ayin sham ta'amom milbadze ragile lehistaef mize isur acher. Usually from that you run into a different isur. Don't we know that Rashba writes Bet Yosef, and it's brought in Bet Yosef, the reason that you can't work before tefillah is because you don't want to pay attention to anything else. So you sit and schmooze with people. You set yourself up for a gathering in a coffee room, sitting and drinking coffee and talking and schmoozing. Whatever the subject of the shmooze is, that's not proper. וכן כתב בשולחן ערוך, סוף סעיף ב', and Maran writes that as well, שהוא אסור להתעכב בדברים אחרים, that's אסור to stop yourself from תפילה with other things, דברים אחרים, כלל, anything, it's אסור עד שיתפלל until you daven, והרגילים באספת חברים, and those who have this minhag, the bad minhag of gathering together, drinking coffee or tea, רגיל לפעמים על ידי ריבוי השיחה לעבור על זה גם זמן קריאת שמע או תפילה. Sometimes you even miss תפילה, זמן תפילה and זמן שמע. You come Shabbat morning and it's almost time for Magen Avraham, which we at least as Faradim have to certainly be mindful of that and try to get Shema before Magen Avraham time. And here you are sitting and schmoozing over a coffee with someone. Even that 5 minutes could be the 5 minutes that you just missed. Zman Kriyat Shema is something to be mindful of. Now, halakha lemasa. What's halakha lemasa? Chacham Obadia writes in Halichot Olam and the Ben Ish Chai. He says nowadays the minhag is to have regular coffee. Regular coffee means you have a little sugar, right? Now, sugar, in parentheses, sugar is not a good thing to eat. Sugar is poisonous. And really it should be banned, but it's subsidized because there's so much lobbying behind it. Every spoon of sugar that you have, it downgrades your immune system by 50% for a few hours afterwards. So it's not a good thing necessarily health-wise to have sugar, but again, people are used to it. Harvard says whatever is normal. It's normal to have some sugar and some milk, that's fine. You can have it because that's the norm, but says Chavadia, make sure to say your Birkat HaShachar, Birkat HaTorah, and Parashat HaKedah, some of the brachot beforehand. Then, you have this Sinif La'akel that Maran and Shulchan mentioned before, then you're good to go. Ben Ish Chai seems to agree with this, Kaf HaChaim seems to agree with this. Comes the Order Tzion, Chacham Ben Tzion Abba Shaul held not like that. Chacham Ben Tzion held anything that's mezin, that is sustaining factor, it's asur. Hence, sugar, asur. Absolutely asur. He holds that the splendor, the fake sugar, right? They may be cancerous, but it's mutar because it's not mezin. It's not. There's no calories, so to speak, inside. Then he holds that's mutar. But the real sugar, he says, it's mezin, it's asur. Chalav, asur, even a little bit. So that's Order Tzion. Order Tzion is very machmir on having coffees, normal coffee with sugar and milk. He says you have to have black bitter coffee if you want to have coffee in the morning until after tefillah. But again, as the Chafetz Chaim wrote, even back then, 80 some years ago, or almost 100 years ago now, the minhag was to be mekel. And nowadays also the minhag is probably well accepted that people have a regular coffee, but someone that wants to be a real pious individual, a hasid, there are those shitas that they are not so happy about having coffee even after you've said your Birkat HaShachar and so on. But nevertheless, at the very least, the person should be careful to say Birkat HaShachar, to say Birkat HaTorah, some parashiot, a little bit, as much as possible, and that would be perhaps considered a sinif la'akel for that. Which would make it a little bit easier to be lenient. Okay, so that is as far as if Gimel is concerned. But the eating that we mentioned is one more piece that I want to have here, that the Mishna said if a person is weak, a person could be eating a little bit before, so for ta'ameh refuah, for medical purposes, and so on. Now, if a person can't hold themselves, since this tefillah finishes 11:30, 12 o'clock on Shabbat morning, and it's very difficult for him to hold himself until the end, and he's a weak personality, not personality, he's a weak physical body he has, and some people, like, they could faint, they could, not everyone is the same. So if a person can't hold themselves healthy and functional until the time that Tzibur finishes the tefillah, then it's best to be matir for him to daven at home alone, and then eat a little bit afterwards, and then go to Bet Knesset for going and hearing Kaddish and Barechu and other Divrei Kedusha that he missed. That's better, says the Chafetz Chaim in Berura Halacha over here in Dibur HaMatchil V'chen, than doing Misheyochal Kodem HaTfilah V'yelech LeBet Knesset Leitpalel Im HaTzibur. Better daven b'yachid, and then eat a little bit at home and go hear Kaddish Kedusha and Kriyat Torah and so on, than daven with the Tzibur but eat before Tefillah. Right? It's the concept of not eating before Tefillah is more important than Tefillah with Tzibur. It's powerful, powerful words of Berura Halacha, and the Oratzion explains this, Rabbi Zion Abba Shaul, that eating before Tefillah is a Isur D'Rabbanan, it's a Isur Gamur. Rambam brings it, Gemara brings it, it's a drasha from the Gemara. There are those who hold that this is a drasha Gemura, as we discussed before, as we alluded to it before, and therefore it trumps the concept of davening b'tzibur, which is a chiyuv shel hishtadlut, right? It's an obligation. The davening b'tzibur is an obligation of trying to do so. You're obligated to try to daven b'tzibur. But here, if it doesn't work because he can't finish the tefillah before you become faint, so then don't daven b'tzibur. Better not to transgress an isur for an obligation of trying to daven b'tzibur. That's how he explains the prioritizing of this concept. And a person that davens, he davened already with tzibur, and now he can't wait until the end of the tefillah because of his weakness, natural weakness. So the best is, the Kaf HaChaim writes, don't eat in the Bet Knesset, either because of the isur of eating in Bet Knesset, which we're going to have later on in the Shulchan Aruch, or because it's not derech eretz. It's not derech eretz to the tzibur is davening and you're sitting and eating a bowl of cholent. It's not derech eretz, and therefore you should go to a different place and eat there because he needs it for his physical strength. And again, this is to be taken with a grain of salt. This does not mean everyone could just have their own cholent club outside. This is for a person that really is, there are people who like this. There are people who they'll faint, or they'll get headaches, massive headaches, or so on, with their body's not as strong as a regular person. A regular person should be able to go through, especially if you had a coffee with sugar and milk before tefillah, and and that's at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then you want to pull it in another 3 hours before you eat the actual suda. That should be fine for most regular people. I mean, you fast and you're okay. But there are certain people who this actually really bothers them, and so it's not to be taken out of context and be abused, this concept. But there is a concept like this: a person that needs to have medication, or a person that naturally is weak, or is going through some treatment that makes him weak like that. And so on. So sometimes women who are pregnant, women who just gave birth, who are nursing, there could be situations that either medically is advised, or you feel that you're weak enough that you can't function at all without having this. So that is when a person could be lenient. So that's important. Berura Halacha in Dibur HaMatchil V'chen. It doesn't have to be necessarily just a medical condition. It could be a person that's naturally weak.
More medical for someone that like diabetic or someone that actually has to eat something.
Of course you are.
Meaning, in regards.
Because that's the Sorach Refuah.
No, meaning in regards to davening and Sibur, should they still miss? Meaning, would it be better if they just go to shul and?
Oh, you're asking a very cool question. You're saying if a person has a medical situation, is it better for them to daven biyachid and eat, or daven? So that's a good question. If you say that the medical situation that he has is a ptur, because he's not eating for pleasure, he's eating for refuah. So then, if he's eating for refuah, that eating is mutar. He's not transgressing anything. And therefore, wait and daven betzibur and eat whatever it is that you need to eat beforehand. That's not necessarily a transgression. That would seem to me the simple understanding, but I'm not sure. You're asking a good question. So says, so if there's one more Berura halacha over here. If you take a look at the Berura halacha, velo le'echol. He writes over here in the middle, "V'nafka mina bazeh atam hasheni le'esor, afilu achar shekibel alav malchut shamayim bekriyat shema, kol zman shelo yitpalel tefilat shemona esrei." There are two reasons behind not eating before, and according to one, even if you have already said Shema and you accepted malchut shamayim on yourself, still would be asur to eat and drink other things that are not allowed until after Shemona Esrei. Now, the reason that you need the first reasoning still of Malchut Shamayim, of Oti Shlachta Acharei Gavecha, there are two psukim. Remember how it was. There are two psukim. One is Oti Shlachta Acharei Gavecha, the Gemara Darshins, and the other one is Lo Tochlu Al Adam, don't eat until you daven on your dam, so to speak. We discussed this before. And that's an afkamina. So Chacham Obadia explains something very interesting here, that if we only have the first mekor of Oti Shlachta Acharei Gavecha, or if you only had the second one of Lo Tochlu Al Adam, then by Lo Tochlu Al Adam we will still say that the isur is on eating, and an eating that is considered a kazayit. Less than kazayit will be mutar. Achilah shel pachot kazayit would not be really so important, and the shtiya also would be, the drinking would be mutar. But now he said that you say oti shlachta acharei gavecha, ignoring Hashem is not dependent on how much you're eating. It's the concept that you're focusing yourself on drinking before, or on eating before, even if the shiur is not technically a shiur that's asur. That's what Chavadia says. Even less than kazayit would be asur. Te'ima be'alma. You remember we mentioned te'ima is asur, and also drinking would be a challenge as well. We'll start one more Seif over here. It says the Shulchan Aruch in Seif Dalet. Hatzameh v'haraev harehem bichlal hacholim. If a person is very thirsty or is very hungry, they're also considered a chole. V'im yesh bo yecholet lechaven dato. So if you have ability to have kavana, yitpalel, then you have to daven without eating or without drinking those things that you can't drink. V'im lav, but if you mamash cannot have kavana. So again, a person gets up, he's sick. A regular person, oh yeah, everyone is hungry when you wake up, right? That's what's called breakfast, right? You're hungry, but at the same time, there is hungry and there is hungry. There's a hunger that disturbs a person; he cannot have kavana. And there's a hunger that, okay, I'm looking forward to eating, but I could stand and daven if 5 minutes, 7 minutes Shemona Esrei without or half an hour davening, or 1 hour davening without every second thinking about eating. A lot of it is training the mind as well. If you make yourself weaker, then you become weaker. If a person says, "Hachalash yomar gibor ani," the person says, "I could do this. I'm not a sick person. I'm not a weak person." Again, this is where the fifth chelik of Shulchan Aruch comes in. You have to be a chacham. You can't abuse the halakha. Say, "Oh, it says I can't have kavanah. So no way I could have kavanah before I have 5 bowls of cholent and a number of pieces of kugel." That doesn't work like that. A regular person should be able to pull through without it. But if a person is mamash ra'iv and he can't have kavanah, then imratza, if he wants, alit palel at sheyochal. You could eat a little bit, drink a little bit until it's miyashev yodat, until he gives you enough satiation that you could now have yeshuv adat and daven properly. Then you're allowed to do that. Which again, the parameters of this we will B'ezrat Hashem discuss and we will learn in the days to come.